live with everybody for the discussion of today's lecture regarding individual decision making by individuals and firms. With Chapter 9, we're looking to focus specifically on the concept of decision making by households, decision making by the firms. Most of us can agree that in today's time, we have a lot of decisions that are important, a lot of decisions that are crucial. As a reminder, we have homework every Sunday, 11:59 p.m. The report has been adjusted to April 8th. You can submit it as an individual group member, or if your group already has your collective project, send it to everybody, and each person can submit the report in your individual platform together, or your individual section, whichever one is best, or both. We're looking to have exam 2 next Friday during regular class hour, to make sure to log in for chapters 6 through 10. The study guide will become available this Monday. Now, in today's world, all of us have important decisions to make. A lot of things are happening in today's society. Things are changing. Decisions are going to be based on rational financial, based on reason, and in the best interest of the public. For this section, we're looking to focus specifically on the costs of decision making. Some of them are explicitly, it requires a lot of money to be spent. Most of the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis are actual explicit decisions that cost X amount of dollars. And some decisions that we make are implicit costs that does not necessarily require spending some X amount of dollars, but are foregone benefits that have an estimated value that increase significantly. Now, with today's situations, there's going to be a lot of foregone benefits and a lot of foregone transactions that are going to impact the public and the well-being of the country. Now, if we look at the relationship between explicit and implicit costs, both of them are highly related. It relates the opportunity costs of decision-making and monetary outlays. We're going to focus on the decision-making of attending school for a particular year versus, for example, taking a job in this particular time. We have the explicit expenses and the implied expenses, which are implicit costs. And if we look at Mike Kowalski here, attending the university for the first time, his tuition cost will be about $7,000, his books and supplies about $1,000, and his computer $1,500, for a total of about $9,500. The foregone salary that he's foregoing by going to school for that year is $35,000. A lot of people are tentatively laid off today with the situation that is occurring temporarily or for an X amount of time, are going to forego a lot of salary. So the implicit costs could be quite substantial. And if we see the total cost is the summation of explicit plus implicit costs for a total of $44,500. Now, Tiger Woods, for example, Madonna and Bill Gates, the wealthy, the extreme outliers, may have a higher financial standing, but all of them understand that it's rational to make economic decisions that are considering both implicit and explicit costs. For them, in this case, the implicit cost of getting an education might have been a little bit too high or a little bit significant. So they made the decision to be the best golfer, be the best singer, and of course, Bill Gates to fund and start Microsoft. So of the cases, the implicit costs are quite substantial. So the common mistake often is for people to ignore implicit costs and focus explicitly on direct costs. The substantial burden of implicit costs of any activity could be significantly greater. We're going to notice that a lot with today's situation affecting the local economy, the state economy, the world economy, and the nation as a whole. Implicit costs or foregone benefits are going to be quite substantial. Now, how do we know we're better off? With economic decision making, look for the well-being of yourself, your family, of your individual household. For businesses, we need to make economic decisions that are in the best interest of, in general, considering all costs and all trade-offs. For business transactions and individual transactions, household transactions, we need to make decisions that lead to the best economic outcome, whether it's this health outcome, social outcome, and business economic returns, so in the form of economic profit. Whichever decision that you make sure that is in your best interest, economically speaking, for you as a person or as a part of the household or as a business. Traditionally, we have accounting revenue or accounting profit. That is, in this case, the difference between the business revenue, traditional business revenue, the value of sales, minus the cost of operations, explicit costs, and any depreciation of assets. Accounting profit is going to decline for the foreseeable future, especially with businesses being closed, restaurants being laying off employees, not allowed to work or eat, there's going to be low accounting profits. Economic profits, it also includes business revenue, explicit transactions, implicit costs, and depreciation of assets. It's already very low as it is when it comes to economic being profit, because it includes the implicit costs and the depreciation of assets. Both of them are going to decline a lot in the next month or in the next 2 months for most people and most businesses. So we need to consider that economic profits are often lower, but both are going to decline at least for the next 30 to 45 days. In the economic sense, businesses, households, and individuals hold capital, whether it's financial assets or physical assets, combination of both. Both of them have a trade-off. A lot of people are using their financial assets today for spending, to buy groceries, their cash, their checking accounts, their savings accounts, physical assets such as buildings, capital, plant and equipment. They have what is called an implicit cost of capital. Foregone benefits occur when we don't use them to their next best alternative. Buildings, in this case, for example, are empty. They may not generate rent, or people are not going to afford to pay the rent. Income, in this case, if we don't work, we forego income. Or if we own a building, we're made forego rental income if it's not rented, or so on. The interest gain on the assets, if it's not used for the other alternatives, can be gone. With the discussion of today, we're going to see that a lot of people are going to lose their income. A lot of people are not going to be able to pay their rent. Interest on credit cards are going to accumulate, and so on. We always have alternatives to use our capital in the best next alternative. The best alternative that there is right now is to stay healthy, stay strong when we're looking at capital use. So all of us have decisions to make that is going to determine how we move forward in the short term and in the long term until this crisis is resolved. Now, in making decisions, we typically tend to choose between options. Today, you can study. You may not necessarily be able to go out with friends as we used to be accustomed to on a weekly basis, because the priority is to stay home, stay healthy, stay strong, and so on. So either or decisions typically require two alternatives, and we tend to choose the one that is most beneficial. So in this case, choose the one that provides you the greatest positive economic outcomes, positive economic conditions. If it's in business, positive economic profit. If you as a person, the best economic returns that can be financially or socially or individually. In this case, you may choose to stay at home to avoid the crisis, or be out in social public life, puts you at risk. So make sure to choose the best one that best suits you as a person. So all of us have this particular decision-making capability. Some of us make decisions in a timely manner. Some take a little bit longer. In those decision-making process, some people are asking how much or how long is this going to take? How much time we're going to be spent home or in live chats in class or so on. So when we're looking at live discussions, we often analyze the situation of doing a little bit more of an activity versus the cost of the activity, or doing a little bit less, and so on. That's the concept of marginal analysis. Marginalizing your decision-making and making decisions that, in this case, consists of economic benefits and economic costs at the margin. So, for example, how many workers are going to be hired depends on the state of the economy and what's going on in society. Each worker provides benefits to the business, and they contribute to the productivity and output, but each worker is going to cost some X amount of dollars per hour or salary, and so per year. So we have the marginal benefit of production and contribution to the business, and the marginal cost per unit. So marginal analysis is analyzing your benefits at the margin and analyzing your costs marginally as well. Now, if we look at the scenario of Alex going to school in the traditional setting or pursuing higher education, each particular year that Alex is going to spend in school is going to cost him directly $10,000. That's the explicit cost of going to school. And the implied cost will be anything that he's foregoing, such as income, any other leisure activities, when he's spending time in school. If he considers both of those costs, it may be substantial. The total cost, for example, of no schooling, it's in this case 0. He doesn't have to pay tuition, and he can go into the labor market right away. If he spent 1 year in school, he's going to spend 30,000, 10,000 from the cost of tuition, plus 20,000 from the implied cost that he's foregoing by spending his full-time status in school. So if you look at the total cost of education for the first year, it's 30,000, which indicates that he's implying a foregone cost. 2 years is going to cost him 70,000. 3 years is going to cost him a total cost of 130,000. And 4 years for a 4-year university, or 5 years, is going to cost him 220,000 to 350,000. So you're saying, well, my tuition is only 10 to 15,000 a year. Why is it more? Well, we're foregoing the fact that we're excluding implicit costs. It needs to be added because as time progresses, the implied cost increases more. If we want to look at the marginal cost, which is the column on the far end, every year at the margin, it costs differently. Per year, the costs of each particular year, of each marginal year, each unit, in this case, the first year costs 30,000 since it's the first unit from 0 to 1. The second year, I'm going to take the difference between 70,000 minus 30,000 to look at the marginal cost of the second year. So it's going to cost them 40,000. The third year, I'm going to take the difference of 130 minus 70. It's going to cost just that third year 60,000. Reminder, the tuition in this case is assumed to stay constant at 10,000. We all know tuition is rising. Just the School of Governors were, the Board of Governors were looking to meet to increase tuition in some academic institutions. But tuition in this case is assumed to be constant. So if you notice, every year, both total cost and marginal cost is rising, meaning that the implicit cost could be substantial. Marginally speaking, first year cost 30,000, second year 70,000, third year is increasing at the margin. And most of us agree that education per year tends to be more expensive. I remember when I was in school, I used to pay something at the university level where I was studying, about $700 for the semester. Nowadays, 10 years later, it has increased significantly to about $2,000 to $3,000 or so on. So at the margin, every year, it becomes more expensive and total cost is also rising. Now, the greater the amount of time Alex spent in school, he has a higher trade-off or a higher implicit cost. If we look at the years, of the 3 years in school, he's spending 130,000. Those 30,000 is included for tuition, $10,000 per year, but he has an implied cost of $100,000 of his foregone salary. That's what he has foregone in this case for the 3 years that he spent in school, for a total cost of $130,000. You need to consider your implicit cost when you add an assigned value to it. Now, what we saw and what we can see in the chart, there was an increase in marginal cost. Each additional unit of a good or service will cost more as time continues to take place, or in this case, as education years increase. We can have a constant cost, constant marginal cost to be specific, where it stays the same. It doesn't increase, or we can have a diminishing marginal cost in some situations, but for the most part, it has an increasing marginal cost relationship. The marginal cost condition, if it's constant, the cost of each additional unit stays the same, as producing or generating more units, whether it's education, output of goods and services stays the same and it's constant. It doesn't change. Decreasing marginal cost is cost effective. It's a scaled production for the most part. You decrease the marginal cost per unit as the units of production increase. So that will be a decreasing curve. And if we look at the marginal cost, if it's constant, it will be a curve where it will stay the same. And you can go to school indefinitely and it will cost you the same amount of years, but that is rare, at least in some situations. Yeah. Most of us are in school for the benefit that it provides: academic degrees, increasing lifetime earnings, and also in the hope that we are going to have a better future. Now, the total benefit of going to school is going to be measured, in this case, in your lifetime earnings. If you don't attend additional schooling after high school, for example, then you go to the labor market, you may be highly successful and generate greater benefits. or you may go to school and increase your lifetime benefits. Here we're using the benefits of going to school. First year, it increases your total life benefit of $300,000. 2 years, the total benefit is $450,000. 3 years, $540,000. 4 years, $600,000 increase in total benefits. Now, at the margin, each particular year is going to provide you different benefits, which is the column here on the far end. If you notice, your total benefit is increasing, but every year your benefit is getting, it's increasing and getting a little bit smaller, which means that your total benefit is increasing at a diminishing rate. The fifth year is going to give you the highest total benefit, but individually, it may provide you the least benefit here at $50,000. When we take the difference between the first year to the no particular additional years, you have $300,000. So the second year is going to give you a benefit of $450,000. Subtract the benefit of the first year, $300,000. We get just the benefit of the second year is $150,000, which is a lot less than the benefit of the first year in this case. It's possible that you may have higher benefits at different times. Now, what we're looking at is the marginal benefit of each individual unit produced. The marginal benefit of producing additional units here is changing, or in this case, is diminishing. We start at $300,000. The second year provides you only $150,000. The third year provides you only $90,000. The fourth year provides you only $60,000, and an increase in 540 to 600. So the difference here is $60,000. And if you notice the fifth year, it's going to give you the least benefit, $50,000. At that point, you should be ready to enter the labor market and apply your skills and knowledge that you have learned into your actual profession. So the sixth year may provide you no benefit. So keep that in mind. Benefits increase from $300,000 to $650,000, but they increase at a diminishing rate, which is the marginal benefit analysis here from the chart that we can see. Now, the diminishing rate can be graphed here, starting at the highest level. The unit number 1 provides the highest benefit, 2 years, a little bit less benefit, $150,000. And if you think about it, freshman year in college is when everybody's excited, everybody is enjoying. This could be your highest level of excitement. In this case, it's excitement. In this case, it's 1 year provides you the highest benefit. And as you increase your educational time, by this fifth year, you have the lowest financial marginal benefits, since most of you should be ready to enter the labor market and capture your salary or your industry salary at the highest rate possible, instead of foregoing that salary by spending a little bit more time in the educational setting. Now, unless you pursue higher education like a PhD or so on, but it doesn't guarantee a significant jump for some professions. Now, the principle of marginal analysis in the decision-making process states that an optimal quantity is achieved where a condition is fulfilled. If the marginal benefit of any activity is greater or equal to the marginal cost, an optimal condition is reached. The marginal benefit of any activity, for the most part, should be greater than its costs. In optimal setting, they will reach a perfect equality, and an optimal condition could be achieved if the identity is fulfilled. For the most part, I recommend to always have your benefits greater than your costs, but in the optimal theoretical setting, where marginal benefit is greater or equivalent to marginal cost, we have a quantity that reaches the maximum possible net gain of the activity or good or service that is being generated. In this case, we're looking at education. So if we look at our marginal benefit, which is subject to diminishing returns, and we spend X amount of years, in this case 5, we have total benefits that are rising, but marginally each benefit is declining for each additional year spent in school. At the margin, the marginal cost continues to rise per unit, and when both of the curves intersect, marginal benefit, marginal cost, we reach an optimal quantity of 3 years of additional schooling, and that will be, in this particular example, the optimal point of education. Otherwise, marginal benefit declines and marginal cost continues to rise, and we have marginal cost being greater than your benefits in this situation. In the chart right next to it, we see that 3 units or 3 years of education provides you the highest net benefit for those particular years spent, for a total net benefit or total profit of 410,000 when you include your marginal benefits and your costs together. After a certain point, like 4 or 5 years, you have less total benefits and it's no longer beneficial. Now, often cases we make decisions based on different conditions, whether it's rational, irrational, some based on emotion, and some based on including costs that are gone and cannot be recovered. When making decisions, it's important what to include, what to ignore, what to exclude, and so on. And some costs is one of them that we need to exclude in the decision-making process. Some costs are costs that are not recoverable. Can't recover those costs. This is something when you lose, for example, $20. It hurts a little bit because $20, can buy some stuff. If you lose $100, in this case, you start looking for it everywhere. But it won't affect your future. It's gone. You cannot recover it if it's fully not recoverable. Or if you spend an X amount of dollars in a particular good and it's not what it was, what you expected, and you can return it, it's gone. It's a sunk cost. Let it go. Move forward. It shouldn't affect your future life actions. So when there's no use of recline over spilled milk. You buy a gallon of milk, you drop it and it spills, you already spent it. You can't go back and return the gallon of milk with your receipt because the milk is spilled. So let go of some things that you cannot recover, things that are gone, and move forward. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult based on certain conditions of the individual. The concept of decision making with the psychological process or the sociological implications of decision making are often a little bit more complex. If it's strictly economics, you make decisions that are analytical and so on, but often cases, economic decisions contradict human behavior, or human behavior is sometimes different than what we expect. Sometimes it's possible that we may attempt to make the best decisions that we will like, but people will make decisions that are less than the possible highest economic conditions or economic outcome. So it's very common that people make decisions that fall short of the greatest economic conditions that could exist for that person. So it's very common for people to engage in irrational behavior, choosing an option that can leave them a little bit worse off than they had chosen a better option. But there's a very important concept that it is rational for people to make mistakes. It is rational for people to sometimes make choices that are less than optimal based on their individual preferences, based on their individual likes and tastes, and so on. When we make decisions that are completely out of proportion, that's a different story. Out of emotional standpoints, it's a very harsh situation to analyze. So we are rational, but we're humans. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we make decisions that are something that we most prefer, that are less suitable for what we like. So it's possible in the current scenarios that rational individuals can choose decisions that provide them the highest optimal return, great, or make decisions that in their rational mind gives them a little bit lower payoff, but gives them a better peace of mind. So the rational individuals choose the greater economic payoff, or individuals, for example, in the private sector that work a lot of hours, 10 to 12, 14-hour days, make good money, good decision-making process. So that's a rational condition. And it can be irrational to go work in the nonprofit sector, the nonprofit organizations where you are geared more towards certain other options, but you can pay a little bit less, get a little bit different work. Both situations are fine. Or in other cases, when we are concerned about some people that need our help, concerned about someone else's well-being, when something is fair, charity donations, it's rational to donate X amount of dollars to people that are in need. You're rationally lowering your economic payoff to improve someone else's welfare. I just saw in the news that since restaurants are closing, people are giving tips of $1,000 to $2,000 to the business because they want to stimulate income. You're choosing rationally to lower the economic payoff to improve someone else's welfare. And the concept of bounded rationality. This is when making the best possible optimal decision, it's difficult to analyze, and we choose the one that is close enough, the good enough scenario. It's not exactly the best possible outcome, but it's close enough. It's bounded rationality concept, just about right. Is it good enough? Everything else it will take me too much time. So there's certain combinations as to why people choose to make economic decisions that are not always empirical, are not always analytical, but they're just good enough. And some people are just don't like to take risks, risk aversion. Some people are risk loving, some people are risk neutral, some people are risk averse, no risk at all. They have a high payoff, highly risky, so they just don't take risks. And we get more into the discussion of behavioral economics. Often cases, some people make irrational decisions. They just make every decision that is completely irrational. You can think of some individuals within your community that are sometimes irrational. They just choose options that leave them worse off, regardless of the recommendations. In the sense of behavioral economics, we can see that psychology and economics analyzes certain fields of decision-making process. It's very interesting science, and at least from an economic perspective, we can pinpoint about 6 common mistakes that may lead to irrational behavior. But there are a lot more. There are many more. Sometimes people just act irrational in the state of emotion, like road rage, for example. You can have a perfectly educated, working individual, but if someone cuts them off in the freeway, they behave irrational for that time frame. Those are other concepts. But from economics, people often have a misperception of costs. They include costs that are not related. They don't understand the full cost implications. Often cases, confidential analysis or being overconfident about certain things may cause issues in financial transactions, meeting deadlines. It's not a bad thing to be confident. I always recommend to be confident in what you do. Is when overshoot that confidence is when it could provide a little bit bad of outcomes if it's not done in its sense of time. Setting unrealistic expectations. People that are very unrealistic of things, it's better to have a objective mindset to reach those objectives or goals and then move forward. But often cases we see people that are over optimistic about certain things and don't reach those particular targets anytime. Counting dollars unequally is when you mismanage your spending, when you have a misunderstanding of cash versus credit, going on a credit card debit spending spree versus keeping your cash or your transactions on check. We spend a lot more when you have a debit, credit, or a plastic card than when you do with actual cash. Nowadays, most people just use cash, use debit or credit, or Venmo or other means of payments than we do with cash. Very few people carry now cash with large amounts. And one that is a little bit more towards the psychological, economic, or behavioral economic side is loss aversion. When we're sensitive to losses, we're sensitive to things, we're unable to recognize losses, and we cannot move forward. So a lot of people confuse loss aversion versus risk aversion. They're not the same thing. Loss aversion is just being sensitive to a loss. This could be socially or financially. If you're loss averse, you can move on. You just can't move on. In a social setting, when you lose something, you just can't interact socially. In a financial setting, when you lose large amounts of dollars, it's hard to recover from a financial loss. So always keep your finances in check and your social integration relatively good with the people that you care. And lastly, we want to make sure that you always make decisions. Decisions that are good, decisions that are accurate, that are analytical, that are important. If you fall under the status quo bias and you avoid making decisions, it's more of a self decision condition. Plato said that the act of making a decision is a decision. The act of not making a decision is a decision in itself. So sometimes people find it hard where when they have to make a decision and are given many options, they go into a decision paralysis situation, and they find it difficult to make decisions or the status quo. everybody decides for you or someone else decides for you. For economic standpoint, always make decisions, always take actions, and make sure to make decisions that are at least that's suitable for you as a decision maker in anything that you're doing, family, household, work, as a firm, or in anything. We'll conclude the session for today with decision making by individuals and firms. Please complete the assignments. Have a good afternoon. Enjoy the rest of the day. And I'll see you in chapter 10.